Beholders may be one of, if not the most recognisable monsters to Dungeons & Dragons players, new and old. They've existed in one form or another since D&D's very inception, and today we're going to honour them by doing a deep dive into their lore, history, abilities, and my tips on integrating these magical murderballs into your D&D game. Beholders have an iconic appearance, a legless Mike Wazowski with 10 Medusa-like eye stalks and an enormous toothy maw. On account of their 11 eyes, they can see in all directions at once, making them impossible to ambush and giving them incredible perceptive ability. They're completely unable to see in colour, but due to their tendency to inhabit deep underground caverns in the Underdark, they can see incredibly well in pitch-black environments. Beholders are actually genderless, and their skin is made of some sort of stone-steel hybrid material that only further hardens upon their death. Despite this, they can fly, or rather, magically levitate, and their internal structure reflects this, being made of lightweight, leather-like cartilage that provides structure without meaningfully increasing their already incredible weight. Their enormous brain and nervous system is the means by which they hone their arcane abilities, amplifying magicka through their eye stalks. In spite of their carnivorous appearance and aggressive nature, beholders are actually omnivores, and had 2 stomachs capable of storing copious amounts of additional food. While a beholder only needed around 9 kilograms of food per day, they can actually eat up to 270 kilograms, storing it in their stomachs to stockpile and use over the next few weeks. And all of this food needs to go somewhere, but they obviously don't excrete like a typical creature, and instead, their digestive food is mixed with air through incredibly fine intestines and arteries, then drained back to their mouth to be dribbled out when it was devoid of nutrients. Foul. Although they're capable of eating and digesting anything, they preferred to eat small mammals and birds while they were still alive, and enjoyed drinking blood and wine. To hunt this, their iconic eyes were incredibly acute, being able to focus on the most minute details over 250 feet away, even in the dark, and their crystal irises could be changed into whatever shape the beholder desired, allowing arcane rays, magic, and their vision to be tightly directed at what they're looking at. And these eyes were the source and dispenser of their magic, and they needed to observe magical abilities, creatures, and items to power their own abilities. Thus, they would pile magical items high in their lairs to continually fuel their arcane abilities. Their enormous central eye also propelled an anti-magic field that, much like Cyclops, could not really be turned off unless the eye was removed, completely closed, or rotted out by disease. Beholders produce a lighter-than-air gas called teucium, which could collect in the body of the beholder, and then they generate or expel it automatically to ascend, descend, change directions and orientation, and generally move around. Finally, beholders come into being through their ability to warp reality with their incredibly powerful subconsciouses. They can spawn duplicates of themselves or other beholder-like creatures just through having nightmares about them. Otherwise, they reach maturity at around 2 years old, and at 30 gain an egg-shaped wound beneath their tongue, often leading the beholder to sequester itself away in its lair till it gives birth about 6 months later. And it does this by unhinging its jaw, splitting up its womb, and then biting it off, leading to a brood of 3 to 12 baby beholders. Although they would only really look after the one infant that most resembled itself, and they could only give birth one time in their 150-year lifespans. Beholders have existed nearly unchanged from the very first edition. In fact, that's when the beholder as a concept first came to fruition, and from edition to edition the depictions of beholders adapted very little, only really changing with the evolving art style of Wizards of the Coast. In 1975, in the very first D&D supplemental handbook, called Greyhawk, the beholder came to stage, a sphere of many eyes, and it held a prominent place as one of the most identifiable monsters since then. They were developed as hateful, avaricious monsters, only capable of malicious deeds. While initially it had this fleshy, skin-like appearance, the second edition depiction by Keitha Parkinson gave the beholder its iconic appearance, with its heavily armoured plate-like carapace and spindly eye stalks. This is where they were also given their xenophobia and sense of self-superiority, and they stayed this way for a long time, remaining largely unchanged until D&D 5th edition, where they gained some relatives, the Death Tyrant, Spectators, Deathkiss, Gouth, and Gazer, alongside the Half-Mind Flayer, half beholder, mind witness. They've been used as villains in many D&D adventures. Notable inclusions include Xanathar, Zabash, Kavan, and Ocularia. However, more recently, not all beholders have been decidedly evil. Large Luigi, for example, is a good aligned bartender and one of the most enlightened entities across the D&D universe. While their history is largely unknown, some suggest that beholders had originally been created in the images of gods. Their avarice and reliance on magical knowledge to fuel their arcane abilities, leading them to travel across the realms and gather as much information as possible, before reporting it back to their hive mothers, who would in turn pass it on to their prime god. This collection of knowledge feared the other deities. Such knowledge could not be collected in one place. One would become too powerful. And so this entire species, the beholders, were cursed, forgetting their original purpose and being turned into the xenophobic, paranoid creatures we see today. How can a species cooperate to collect knowledge for a single purpose if they see themselves as the solely important centre of it all? This knowledge was kept in the spindle on the planet Hakatha, a reminder of the original purpose of the beholders, to remind them of their original cause, their collective goal. And only one beholder is known to have made it to this library, Large Luigi. And once he gained the ultimate knowledge of the universe, he decided to settle down and become the proprietor of his own tavern, the Happy Beholder. He's known as one of the most enlightened and knowledgeable creatures across the multiverse. Alongside their innate ability to fly, each of their eyes possesses an innately magical nature. They don't toy with their prey, instead unleashing all of their powers at once to obliterate their foes. Charming, fearing, petrifying, slowing, paralyzing, killing, or downright disintegrating their foes. And casting anti-magic from their central eye in a 150-foot cone, although at a cost. They would also stop their own magical powers if they strayed in front of its ray. This left its enormous jaw the only thing left to devour its foes that lie directly in front of it. With all that information, it can be a bit overwhelming to make a successful beholder. It's important to remember that your campaign is your own world, and there's no prescription for how to play any monster or NPC in D&D. With that said, this is how I would run a beholder in D&D. Since beholders see themselves as the supreme beings of the universe, the centre of everything, they will never find themselves as a underling. In my opinion, they should either be a leader or a lone wolf. But given their ambitious yet paranoid nature, they would surround themselves only with weaker-willed or more easily controlled individuals as a small army to do their bidding, or to collect them arcane items or creatures from across the world. I would recommend them as a leader of an illicit guild, or perhaps finding themselves as a hidden and mysterious member of the ruling class that has never actually been seen in person. You could keep them as a villain that remains safe and hidden, while sending pawns to do their dirty work, or as a devious and tenuous ally that sends the party on some less savoury quests, but in exchange for hefty rewards. In combat, they'll avoid toying with their prey in most cases, simply using their disintegration ray on the most powerful opponent before turning their anti-magic field to the casters and using whatever creatures it has at its disposal to throw themselves in the line of fire. They're a foe that is definitely not to be trifled with. Used properly, a beholder can be an iconic enemy in a campaign or a difficult ally to navigate. Either way, by fleshing them out with a self-indulgent personality and a mob under their control, you can elevate them to something greater than what lies in the monster manual. A great campaign needs more than just a single beholder-based villain or ally to be really special. You also need some unique shopkeepers for your party to interact with and purchase things from. Check out 13 incredibly unique shopkeepers to add to your D&D game here. I promise you won't be disappointed.